And you can be honest. You might say, I'm not going to love this person, but I'm horny. Okay. But don't be upset if like he cheats on you, or don't be upset if he's polyamorous.
All right, everyone, it is interview time, and we are here with Dr. Ray. He has many titles and has done many things, and he's also the author of All It Takes Is One, Drop Your One Big Hidden Belief, and Master Your Life. We could talk about so many things with Dr. Ray. I mean, you might hear us call him Ray, which we will stick to, or also we like Doctor, though. It's just fun. And we are sticking to the topic today of why maybe you or people like the bad boy, the bad girl. Maybe you can resonate with this, or maybe you have a friend who's like, I keep chasing the bad boy and I can't stop. So we're going to talk all about that. You all already heard a little bit about Dr. Ray in the bio, in the intro. But Dr. Ray, can you please tell us and our listeners a little bit more about how you got to where you are today in the field of sexuality?
Cool. And when I share this, I'll try to pull parts of my life to where maybe what I share is relevant or has some perceived value as well. Originally, I moved into this work because basically I'll just fast forward. Let's say after I got my second DUI, the counselor, Jim, said, or that he said to me, he says, I don't know if you have a drinking problem, but you create problems when you drink, which was true. And then I sought therapy and started working on myself. I definitely had a lot of anger. I definitely had a challenging upbringing. I had solid parents, but where I grew up was a little bit challenging. My father had PTSD and so forth. Well, fast forward with that, it led to me drinking and driving, getting arrested, and then starting to do my inner work. And then fast forward with that, I was also a musician. And when I say musician, I bought a recording studio. I wanted to be a rock star. But this is also happening while I was on this healing journey to figure out myself. And it never stopped. But in that, a way to support my career, my musical career, was I was a stripper. And
Yeah.
so I traveled to many different states to dance. I wasn't one of those people where like I was just doing it and spending my money and, it was just to get attention. It was a lucrative job to where I can be in a studio during the day and at night I can work. And it was fun. And also I would do performances where there was singing involved and also, so it tapped into my musical talents. But if you can imagine, I know there's a stereotypical perspective of strippers in that world, and a lot of it's true. And that is where that there was a lot of people, or women, more women than men, who had been sexually traumatized. To the people I was dating, that there was always kind of like this chaos to, I too was attracted to, say, the hot mess. The hot mess might be, that's the female version of like what you're talking about, the narcissistic guy that maybe women continue to be attracted to and so forth. So I had that experience, and a lot of it had to do with trauma. It had to do with poor boundaries. Most of them had been sexually perpetrated. And that launched me into becoming more curious about sexuality, but also during a time when this was going on, I was still discovering myself. Like, what do I like? What works for me? To even becoming more aware of how I was raised to understand sexuality, where it was in an open home. My dad was Jewish, my mom was Buddhist. So we didn't have the Christian or Catholic guilt associated to it. So I was very free and open, and I discovered also that's why I was able to say strip and be detached from it. It wasn't where I was some, again, loser, and not saying dancers are losers at all. I'm saying that there's a generalization of those who go into stripping and the porn industry, and it's very similar. And so that kind of opened up my eyes to understand sexuality, and then also led to where I wanted to learn about it in a more spiritual and holistic way. And that's when I also started to mentor under Montauk Chia, who's a grand master of Qigong and sexual energy.
Wow, this is impressive. I love this story. I hooked up with
She
a
also loves
stripper once.
strippers.
I do. I hooked up with a male stripper from Scotland. He was super hot. Electrician by day, stripper by night. Shout out to him. And yes, this is a great way to build up to this topic of why do people like the bad boy, bad girl. And when I think of a bad boy, remember the movie Grease? Now there's a couple of them, but I think
Yes.
of that. What was his name? Not Sandra Dee's boyfriend. What was his name? I can't remember his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
That John Travolta played him. Why can't I think of this?
I don't know. John Travolta's character.
John
Let's go with that.
Travolta's character.
Yeah.
And it's like that kind of leather, and maybe they have tattoos, and they're kind of mysterious in a way. Maybe they're smoking a cigarette or a big joint, or
They're
maybe
like
they're
a little
stripping.
aloof too,
Yeah,
right?
and there's someone that you may not want to bring home to mom and dad when you're younger, and then you get older, and then the bad girl, or
He said hot mess. I like that.
the hot mess. I'm trying to think of what a bad girl would be like. Would it be like just like the rocker chick? I don't know. So this is why I wanted to ask you, how do we define the bad girl, bad boy personas, and do they have a look, or what does it entail?
I'm going to describe both. And so I see them as more archetypal energies. In other words, the bad boy has been given that label because he's not conservative. He goes against the status quo, to he might be mysterious, to his arrogance can come off or be perceived as confidence. And therefore, like to say in a culture where a lot of men are feminized, they lack the courage to approach a woman, that with the bad boy or the man who maybe is overly confident, at least he's leaning into his masculinity, even if it's maybe a little bit toxic and so forth. So there is that. And secondly, that if you're used to, meaning women, you're used to being with men who are overly sensitive, to where you find yourself moving into the motherly caregiving position where you're holding space for their emotions, to where it just seems like maybe more drama and the guy's not really good in bed, then of course this guy, even if he's not the man you're going to bring home and tell your parents that you're going to marry him, at least you might get some benefits from it, and also experience something in that relationship that you don't get with the nice guy or a lot of the men today. So that's one example. Now, if you want to go to the like literal bad, where the guy's doing drugs in prison and so forth, I would just say that typically women who choose those types of guys have unhealed trauma. It's what they witnessed. They're just repeating generational trauma. They don't have strong boundaries, and they ignore the red flags because they can't take care of themselves, and they probably don't really love themselves. Therefore, being in a relationship with this guy who's inconsistent is better than being alone. So that's kind of the description maybe of the bad boy. And then as far as the hot mess or the bad girl, it could be where it's the woman who doesn't take any personal responsibility. It's really hard for her to hold down a job. Her emotions are all over the place, and what she feels, she thinks is real. But in that also is often this feminine essence, this kind of mystery again, to where a masculine man or just a regular man might feel like he can rescue her or even conquer her or have some false sense of self because he can help her because he can't help himself. Because a healthy man would not necessarily want to rescue a woman because he knows that she's not going to be able to maybe contribute to his life, to where, particularly if he's a father, he's going to be not only taking care of his kids, he's also going to be taking care of her. But again, guys who go for that type of women, those type of women, again, they might not be that confident, to where their sense of self is always doing for others rather than looking at themselves. It could be also where they grew up in a culture where they didn't experience that sexiness, that excitement, and so forth. And including myself, I remember when I was a teenager, that's when it started. And I didn't really understand that until later on. As an example, there was a girl named Trina, and I met her when she was 13 and I was 15. And I remember that Halloween party, she was wearing lingerie, 12 years old, 13 years old.
Wow.
This is the 80s, but still, her mother allowed her to dress that way. So, of course, she looked sexy to me, to a 15-year-old. She was dressed way more, like age appropriate than she should have. But we never hooked up. And it wasn't until I was 19. And of course, she was always inconsistent, but she was a mystery. And I can't believe I'm sharing this, but why not?
Do it. Shameless sex.
Well, we finally had sex when maybe I was 20 and she was 18. I don't know. But she said to me, if I start to cry, don't stop. If I say stop, don't stop. And I forgot the code word she told me. While we started having sex, she reenacted her rape.
Oh, wow.
It was so fucking scary. You know the crying game where the guy is with a transgender and he showers himself off because he's shocked because he was with a man? And you remember that? I kind of went through that experience of like, oh my God, I felt violated. I was shocked. I was surprised.
Because you didn't get to consent to that. You didn't get to consent to, like, I mean, yeah, she's dealing with her consent issues with you without asking for consent of you to actually hold that space for her.
Yeah, but it was just like she bit me though. I'm talking about I was bruised. Literally, she was biting me, and that is the roughest sex I had ever have had. And I have never had that before, and never would I do that. But this woman, again, like she'd been molested, she had been raped, she had been through these experiences, and a lot of men were attracted to her, and she was, you could consider the hot mess. And this is the same case with other women I had dated also who were the hot mess. I mean, I know a lot of women go through this in general, but particularly the hot mess who's overly sexual and has poor boundaries. Yes, very often they've been perpetrated.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, so you're saying it was like you didn't consent to going, like her reenacting her own rape trauma. And then also you're feeling like there was things that she was doing that you were not consenting to on your body as well. And you're saying, a lot of people have, and they're perpetuating, there's like the, hurt people hurting people, right? It's like the trauma that we have in the past, if we don't work on it, we can continue to like put it outward on our partners and lovers. And I think, so I just want to clarify this. So, because you named a number of reasons why people are attracted to the bad boy and the hot mess. And it sounds like ultimately it's coming down to that the person who's being attracted to those people, to their own history, whether it's trauma or it's insecurities or a lack of awareness or connection to themselves. Is that like a good way to kind of generalize it? It's not just like a random act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people who hear this will get defensive and say, that's not me, or stop judging me. And I would respond with, this is also why you stay stuck, because you have the inability to receive feedback. This is not to cut you down, but it's to turn it inward, because it's not like the last 10 guys who you dated, randomly they happen to be drinkers, or randomly all happen to be narcissists and so forth. There's something about that, because there's other men who are not like that. So what is it about that you are unconsciously attracted to? What is it about that which, you are fulfilling a need within yourself that you haven't come to know? Why did you ignore the red flags? I mean, you saw the red flags. Why didn't you trust your intuition? And, and when we become honest with ourselves in turning inwards to take personal responsibility, we always see how we participated and how we can do better. And that's all this is about. It's about discovery. Like, yeah, I somehow am attracted to this type of energy, and it doesn't serve me.
Yeah. And I think that will bring us to the next question then. So, which is, you kind of already answered that, but we'll just revisit it. So I'm someone who was in a, relationship with, that was, I would call like toxic bad boy / narcissist for a number of years. And once I was in it, I was like, oh, fuck, I'm in it, because I like, it was like, felt like an addiction. And now that I'm out of it, I feel like I'm not like, oh, that's just who I'm attracted to. That was a one-time thing, y'all. And I know where it came from, some daddy issues even though my dad was a very different person, there was some similarities there. So I'm someone who came out of that where I'm not that person who's going to like, I keep doing this, I keep choosing this over and over again. But a lot of people do. I have friends who they say this, I keep choosing the bad or not so great partner, and most of them are women, but I've heard men say this too. But they claim they can't help it because it's what they like. And you kind of already commented on this, but what are some tips for those people?
So first off, it's when people say that it's what he or she likes, but if you're specifically talking more about women, that's not 100% true. And what I mean by that is, first off, I'm going to mention my book. This is a very good way to kind of segue into
Bring it out.
Yeah. My book, All It Takes Is One, for, I'm not going to say the price, I'm just kidding. But there's the first exercise in this actually gets to the core of what I'm respond to next. So in the book, it's this exercise called the Return to Love exercise, okay? And it's 10 questions that you're supposed to just respond to quickly, like free associate. So as an example, it's love means you fill in the blank. My family taught me that love meant you fill in the blank. I received love when I fill in the blank. I didn't receive love when you fill in the blank. I needed my parents to love me when and the responses I got a lot from clients was love equals pain to me. My family taught me that love has to be earned. I received love when I achieved good grades. I didn't receive love when I disagreed with my parents. I craved my parents' love when I was in college. So here, the person becomes proactive and also recognizes, oh, I have a very skewed perception of what love means. So if you have a skewed perception of love means, it means you probably have a shitty love map. So it's that. So then in this exercise, you reframe it and it turns into this. And of course, a client, a reader is to do this on their own and they're guided to. Here are my responses. Love means I will get hurt becomes I am safe to receive and give love. My family taught me that love must be earned becomes I am loved unconditionally. I received love when I got good grades becomes I receive love every day because I am loved. I didn't receive love when I disagreed with my parents becomes I am authentic and loved for who I am. And so it's like taking back your power. And so if it's just about sex and you're attracted to a man's physique, sure, maybe that's all you want. But if you actually want a relationship, and I say it that way, is because once you're in a relationship, it doesn't mean you're set for sale. It means that you have to continue to relate and grow and expand. And if you're dating a man who doesn't communicate, if you're dating a man who breaks agreements, if you're dating a man who he doesn't commit, then it's not going to build that trust for you to become so much more in that relationship and experience even the lovemaking that you maybe desire. In fact, many people who are in these, say, toxic relationships and they think they're really great in bed or they think this sex is great, I'll tell you this. If your sex is in survival mode, meaning that it's come from that unhealed place, like remember I mentioned the woman who reenacted her sex or her abuse with me, it cannot become fuller or more than what you know. And if what you know is based in trauma, being controlled and not being free, then you may not be having the great sex that you claim to be having because you have all this blockage in your body. And the reality is the only way for you to have sex is to not be vulnerable and kind of have more dirty sex or controlled sex or sex like a porn star. But to really be seen and go into lovemaking and having great sex, your heart has to be open. You have to be fully transparent and authentic. And people are afraid to do that because they're afraid to be hurt. And that is why I go right to it. It's what does love mean to you? Start with that. And if this doesn't look like love, meaning the man you're meeting or the woman you're meeting, why would you do it? Ask yourself that. If this does not look like love, why are you in it? And you can be honest. You might say, I'm not going to love this person, but I'm horny. Okay. But don't be upset if like he cheats on you, or don't be upset if he's polyamorous. You know, he's sharing where he is at. So don't bet on his potentiality. Listen to what he says, but more importantly, pay attention to his actions more than his words.
I think dating people for their potential is such a dangerous game to play because it's common. People wait for other people to change. Oh, I know. I can see their potential. They're such a good person somewhere in there. And I have really, really close friends, and I've been there too, where they've been with bad boys. And specifically, mostly my female, hetero friends have been with bad boys, and then they get with the nice guy, the person that they're maybe not as attracted to, and it gets boring, or it gets monotonous. And monogamy, right? Like some people are like, it can be something that doesn't have enough excitement. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you want novelty, and maybe you're not getting that from your nice partner, but from your super nice partner. But that brings me back to the next question, because I've been there. I was married to a really nice guy, and I totally went the bad girl route, and I'm not proud of it. I was out of integrity, and it ended in divorce for various reasons. It was a can opener for other things that weren't working on both ends, right? So bringing it back to how someone can learn, and I think you sort of went that way of the questions to ask yourself with what love was to you growing up with your parents. But how can someone learn to be attracted to the nice guy or the great woman and partner in general? Buy your book, first of all. I get that one.
That's pretty funny. I don't make shit off my book, by the way.
That's what happens when you write a book, okay?
Called being an author.
We have a book too, we know.
Yeah. Like, I'm actually more negative with promotions than I am with anything else. So
We're promoting it right now, everyone. Yeah.
It's in the background. So anyway, I don't think a person could become like authentically attracted to the nice guy or nice girl, because it could get boring. It would be more this. How can I, like saying me or you, or people listen to this, how can I be fully authentic and comfortable to express myself? How can I be fully transparent with who I am and with the person I'm going to meet? Now, with that, what's going to happen is if you start to meet people and you're too, like say your personality is too big or too open, they'll run away. That's awesome because you're vetting people. And hands down, every person I ever worked with who say has dated the boring woman or man, when they start going a little bit deeper, they recognize, oh my God, like I've had 1 foot in, 1 foot out to, oh my God, I'm fucking boring and I'm afraid. How do I expect to get that out of a person if I'm not embodying, say, that excitement also? And this will maybe help also. I am in a relationship with a woman who's a coach, and she's been coaching for 20 years. And we're going through something, and we're pretty open about it. We have a really great relationship. However, we sometimes have power struggles, and that power struggles is more, and more looks like this. So I'm pretty masculine for the most part in all areas in my life. Well, her mother was literally a nun before she got married to her dad. Her dad was in the closet. In fact, he died of AIDS while she was in New York, had no idea that her parents were living separately, and her dad was dying of AIDS. So talk about major trust issues. But in hindsight now, she recognized that it was actually her mother who kept the family together. It was her mother who was more masculine. It was her mother that was really the glue. And so her mother was a lot in her masculine. And so my girlfriend, Nicole, when that happens with us sometimes, we're not polarized. It's more almost like we feel like roommates. We talk about it, but she's learning how to let go a little bit. Not with force, but she recognizes, oh my God, I've not trusted men. I've not trusted the masculine. My mom didn't trust my father. I get it. So I need to learn how to relax and be in my feminine. And so that is an issue as well, meaning that sometimes what comes with what's going on with the boring man is that he's not open sexually. He's trying to be the nice guy. He's trying to please you. And you feel that lack of authenticity. He doesn't own his balls. And so therefore, there's no excitement in that. And for whether it's a man or a woman, for there to be sexual excitement, you have to be open and free. You have to be open and free. And so the question would be, or the direction would be this: I'm going to be as authentic as I can be. I'm going to remove all the blocks I have in my body so I'm open sexually. I'm going to be as authentic as I can be. And I'm going to meet people who are a match to me. You'll have the greatest sex. You'll have the most authentic conversations. It's what I have. I have with my lover and I have with my friends. We talk about everything. Like us right here, this is like not the normal conversations people can have. It's not like you could be at a fucking Applebee's and go, blah, blah, and start talking about masturbation and blah, blah, blah. All of that. People will cringe, right? So this is why you do this podcast also, is to educate. And so what it is that we want to educate ourselves. And when we educate ourselves, we'll also meet a person who hopefully matches that. And if he or she does it, then move on.
Well, and what I'm hearing with what you're saying too, so it's like people seem to get kind of stuck in this cycle of being attracted to drama, or that's how it seems to feel for them. And what I'm hearing you say is, and this is my brain sometimes just summarizes things in my own terms, but I'm hearing like, because being authentic and being open is like you're taking risks, but they're not like dramatic bullshit risks, right? It's like learning how to, because risks equal excitement, like, you know, they're edgy, get the butterflies, I'm sweating a little bit. And so it's like learning how to take really vulnerable risks as opposed to be like, and feeding off of that as opposed to feeding off of the like the chaos, turmoil, roller coaster drama. Is that kind of issue?
Absolutely. So as an example, if you are doing what I call the shadow work, where in a relationship, you are having great sex, things are flowing, and yet you're living life and you didn't have the perfect childhood, your shit's going to come up. It's going to show up in the form of emotions. And those emotions, and eventually they're going to show up in a bedroom. And so if you are communicating from that authentic space, then you will also rediscover your partner every day. It cannot get boring. But in that also is going to be enough drama and curiosity rather than chaos and inconsistency. Because, you know, some people, I've seen it, where they just can't build shit. I'm not a typical parent, by the way, and you might go down a rabbit hole by asking me more questions, but my son showed up when he was already 5.5 months old. I wasn't part of his pregnancy. I didn't know I had a child. And so with that, like, I'm an entrepreneur. I never saw myself driving a minivan or like being like a typical dad taking a family to Wally World. So with that being said, I'm just a more observant, and I hear how married couples talk. I hear how parents talk, and it's utterly, most of the time, fucking boring. It's boring. It's all about the kids. It's not about what's really important about their romantic relationship. It's typically about the task in hand rather than, I'm feeling something right here. Can we talk about this? Can we put aside time away from the kids? And so many of us get caught up in our work or the things to do that we forget about self-care in our bodies. And when we are in tune with our bodies, we might see, fuck, I'm operating off an overstimulated nervous system. No wonder why I don't want to have sex. Or I'm operating off an overstimulated nervous system. This is why I continue to masturbate 3 times a day. I mean, whatever the case is. And so when we really pay attention to our bodies, you know, that's the unconscious map to what's really going on in our minds. And so with that, to me, at least, that's pretty exciting to discover your partner from that perspective versus this whole linear, relationship to we don't talk about those things or we avoid those conflicts to let's not talk about what happened to me. I want to save it for my therapist. Like if you're in a relationship, you should be able to talk about everything.
Yeah. Well, I always think about this in terms of this modern day and age where there's so many distractions. And I'm like, did people 150 or 200 years ago talk about their emotions a lot more because they didn't have the distraction of like television and just media being blown up all the time, available in your face, or movies, and no, they didn't, right? Because there were so many different obstacles. Well, maybe some did, but I think about the evolution of humans, and I feel like now we have all of these resources at our fingertips, and it's a great thing, but it also is distracting because you can see so much more of what a healthy relationship looks like, or what it should be, or what you want your relationship to be. And you're not trying to survive or suffer being away from your partner because they're at war or something, right? Like it was back in the day. And I don't know, maybe people did talk about their emotions back then. And like, I think half of the wounding that comes up or the triggers come up from like my great grandfather and, those like people that probably stuffed their emotions and ran away from home or were like, got the shit beat out of them all the time because they didn't do something right. I don't know. But what do you think, Doctor?
I know for sure they didn't talk about their emotions a whole lot because they were more in survival. And it wasn't even part of their awareness or consciousness that it was important to talk about. In fact, a good way to kind of provide evidence is to look at alcoholism and how it was probably pervasive before it became known. But a lot of men were coming home after working long hours and they would just sit in front of a TV and drink beer and be angry. And so it wasn't until a little bit later on they recognized, like, holy shit, they called it a disease. But if you were to look at it from a broader perspective and ask the question, why were they drinking? To push down their emotions. They couldn't talk about it. They didn't know that they could or had permission to. So I don't think it was really known to do that and the importance of it. Even though, say, Freud existed in the 1800s, or that there was a psychology movement happening. Most people were not aware of that. Now we are, because it's everywhere. You know, what makes it way different now, like say with children and even like young adults compared to the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, it's that a man or a boy could maybe come across a magazine where the woman's showing a little bit of bush and he sees her boobs, and, you know, it's scandalous. Like, oh my God, and he puts that one little picture underneath his pillow, or he hides it from his mom. He's really excited about it. In fact, I remember finding a Playboy when I was in 4th grade. I remember Mr. Compton said, give it to me. And we gave it to him. And then we looked, and he was like, he had like the centerfold opened up, and three of us boys were looking in the window, seeing it. We banged on the window and we ran off. He'd open up the door, like, you know, but we thought it was kind of innocent. We thought we were curious because we were attracted to it. But now you have children who are 9, 10, 11 years old who can go on a phone and they can watch someone have anal sex. That's pretty hardcore, you know?
Yeah.
And just imagine how confusing that can be. Not just that, it's everywhere. Like, I feel for all the young girls and teenagers that grew up 2000 and up, where all they've come to know their sense of self is by how many likes they get and their social currency. And as you know, that on Instagram, there are so many attractive young women, and yet you don't know if they really look that way because of the filters, right? So you have very average looking women or young girls looking at these women or girls, and they can't compete, you know? And it creates body dysmorphia, it creates insecurity, and so forth. So it's, you know, that I know I just went somewhere else, but that's how it's way different. And so, you know, I remember my version of this would be this, and I share this with my son. Oh God, some parents might go, oh my God, you share this with him at his age, but my son is fucking amazing and very precocious for his age. And I talk to him at his level to understand it. But you know, he knows porn. I mean, he's not seen it, but of course he's around other kids and they talk about it. I explain it to him from a higher perspective. And, you know, he's asked me questions about it. And I shared with him, I said, did you know when I grew up, Max, I said, the only penises that I had ever seen was when I would get a sneak preview of what my dad was watching, or I found something. And every man in there had a big penis, and way bigger than mine. And I remember all of us boys going into the locker room, and we would hide ourselves because all of us who had seen that thought, oh my God, I'm inadequate, because no one educated us. All we saw was fucking Ron Jeremy. You know, how do you compete with that guy? And well, he's in jail now or whatever. I don't know.
Is he in jail? Oh,
yeah, he got arrested for rape and all kinds of other stuff.
not surprised. We've met him at trade shows. That guy is grabby.
Oh yeah, he's pretty gross. Well, a bunch of women he worked with, like it was during the Me Too movement, he got arrested for multiple counts. But anyway, the point is that was my reference point. No one educated us, me and the younger teenage boys. And so that was our reference point. And so imagine children today, when you have permissive parenting, you have social media raising them, that they really don't know what is healthy and what is not, to what is true and what is not.
So it's like we're moving in a more positive direction in some ways, and in some ways, not so much. And April and I actually joke about this, about how we have a career because of porn. Not because that we do porn, but porn is not the only reason, right? It's also shame and trauma and all these things. And porn is a huge part of what is shaping, young people as sexual beings, or actually people of all ages, and it's not accurate. And so, but bringing this to the piece about the bad boy, hot mess, and I know that we had talked about the childhood. It seems like the childhood stuff, the youth, and you're speaking to like other childhood experiences that can shape like performance anxiety. Is my penis big enough? Da 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 da. Which could later on turn into some sort of thing where you're trying to overcompensate for that. You have some personality that's kind of a douchebag or an asshole because deep down you don't feel good about yourself or you doubt yourself. And I'm not saying that whenever you meet someone who's a douchebag or an asshole or bitch or whatever your thing is, to be like, oh, you just don't like yourself, because that's not going to be helpful. I think that it's opportunities to have compassion, to even if someone to you is like, you're kind of the worst and I don't want you, my boundaries are you don't get to be here, I'm not dating you, we're not friends, we're not talking, and I can still have compassion for you. I can see that you're a human and you probably had some not so shitty things happen in your life, and good, I hope that you go and work on them, but I am going to choose to not date you. Which brings me to our last question, and we'll bring us like the narcissist and toxic partners. And I think that you kind of already commented on this. Are there any generalized ways to screen for these types of people, meaning like the humans that we know we don't want to date and aren't good for us?
Is there an app for that?
Yeah, is there an app for that?
I have actually 11 responses, which could, I would say, spell it out. So you like, for example, I would say both men and women don't know how to really date. In other words, they'll say he was perfect, but he lives really far away. Then he wasn't perfect because he lives in New York and you live in Santa Cruz. Okay. So it's like, wait a minute, that's the feedback you're supposed to receive. That's why they call it dating. I created a program with my girlfriend, Nicole, and she led this, and it was about the red flags. And within 1 to 3 dates, you should be able to gather this information. And I'll just share them really quickly. How does he take care of himself? His life habits. So if he's smoking, he's drinking, and that's not aligned with you, then that's a red flag. His ability to keep commitments. Does he flake? Does he flake on his friends? Does he not show up at his work? Later down the line, when you get to know him, there's a good chance he's not going to keep commitments with you as well. What's his relationships with his parents? Is he talking about them like they're fucking assholes? I never talked to those jerks. Or maybe he did have unhealthy parents, but he says, I love them, but I just kind of keep them at a distance. That's great. But a man who talks about his parents as if he's a child, he's going to bring that shit into the relationship. How's he talk about his past relationships? If he says they're bitches, they're crazy, and he takes zero responsibility,
that's a big one.
He's going to bring that into the new relationship. It's also demonstrating that he's not introspective or not willing to admit how he participated. His boundaries and authenticity. Does he say things just to please you? Is he like the nice guy, but he really is like passive aggressive, and later on you're going to experience that. You want a man who has that strong boundary. How decisive is he? Or lack of it. You want a man who can choose and decide in life. And if he can't, he's going to leave that up to you. How does he communicate? Does he gaslight? Does he open up? Do you know what he's like in his shit? You would want to know that. These are different. I can keep going on. I'm going to stop here, but they might sound like common sense, but most of us ignore these things. The person you're meeting, this is, especially if he's like, say, at least 25, and I know that your listeners are older than that. But let's say if he's 25 to 45, he has lived enough life to maybe know the difference. He's lived enough life to experience some level of having to take personal responsibility. So however he's showing up, that's who he is in that moment, no matter what. Look at his actions. He can talk, but does his life and how he carries himself match that? And that's everything. And you have to be honest with that. And what I noticed with more feminine people, whether it's a man or woman, they might project onto the man or woman what they could become, the fantasy. Or it could be that that feminine person is feeling good in the presence of this person based off the story he or she is telling themselves, even if it's a lie. And so it's very important to be able to detach ourselves from our what we feel that's our own versus how that man or woman is showing up.
These are really insightful and wise bits of advice and tips. These are tips. These are great tips, like these little check boxes. And I'm assuming that a lot more about this particular avenue, this particular last question that we asked would be found within your work, because you do a lot of work with transforming your life. I know you're a doctor, you're a best-selling author. So there's lots of ways that people can navigate this, heal from past trauma and in relationships. And maybe that could even be healing from your parental wounding, right?
Yes.
Because that's where you're building this foundation for your present or your future relationships. And so can you talk about more about how people can find you and work with you? I know that you also have some offerings coming up and you do group coaching experiences. Maybe you do some one-on-one, but please share with everyone how they can find you, your socials, anything like that.
And buy that book.
And your book too.
Well, so first off, the easiest way to find me is my website, which is my name. It's RayDoktor.com. And I know you'll provide that. And then also my book is on Amazon and 35,000 retailers. So if you don't want to give Amazon your money, then you could probably find it in your local store or ask them to order it for you. And the name of my book is All It Takes Is One, and you're providing the link to get that as well. And it's true, I do offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And the group coaching is online, and it's a group experience where if a person is curious of how this looks, they can watch a person be coached and see whether or not this works for him or her. And sometimes people will heal vicariously through others. It's kind of a trip. So those are ways to find me, look for me, hear about me. And of course, on YouTube, there's a lot of videos that have made.
Yeah, you have a lot of content on your Instagram too. I was looking at that. I was like, I love those little quick videos of I just learned something really quickly. I love that. So yeah, you're awesome. And I can't wait to check out your book. And I'm going to share this podcast with all of my friends, current and future.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, how many friends?
Yeah. You need to listen to this episode.
Does this episode apply to? I'm like, almost all of them.
Yeah.
So
I have a question though.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your work came from the porn industry. What does that mean?
So it's not our work. It's the what we are doing. So especially for me as a sex and relationship coach, I find, and same with April and I, with the sex questions we get, it's as if porn, whether people watched it or didn't watch it, but they're still indirectly affected by it based on the people they're having sex with.
Or they learned from it, or they
learned from it, or just the people they're having sex with learned from it. It's shaped sex to be something that it really is not. It's inaccurate. It's unpleasurable especially for vulva owners. It's dry. It's disconnected. And so much of what we're doing is to teach people how to have sex their way as long as they're abiding by consent.
Help them rewire their brains from some of the damage that has been done, because we advocate for porn if you
it's for funsies though. It's just for funsies.
For something to watch, like you would watch a Gladiator 2. Okay. Are you going to go out
and do it?
Go into the Coliseum and try to kill lions? I don't think so. Okay.
So we say thank you porn for the entertainment and for our careers. And that's not the only reason why we have careers. But yeah, that's a lot of what our job is like April said, rewiring.
Yeah, I've been friends and I've dated a couple porn stars in my when I was younger, and none of those lasted too long. But I got a different story, a different perspective, such as it was work. Mm-hmm. Meaning that this took 10 to 12 hours. I was exhausted.
Yeah. So you knew that wasn't reality. We watched that shot. You're like, oh yeah, that took 10 hours and a lot of prep, and it's a job and it's a career. That's why we say pay your porn stars. Like if you go and consume porn, make sure that people, especially if you like those people, that they make money off of it and not just the free clips. But yeah, so again, we love porn. We just love it for entertainment, not as an educator. And that's why we're here.
Absolutely. Thanks. People do think we're porn stars though.
We're not. No.
And we're not. Yeah. They're like, but plus we're called shameless sex, right? So it's like, yes. We're just having sex everywhere shamelessly.
We create ear porn.
Yeah. We're audio people. So this has been a great episode and a lot to lot to process, I think, and take in, and happy that you have resources that are available outside of just this conversation. So everyone check out Dr. Ray Doctor. So that's such a cool name. I was like going off on it at the beginning of the show, but that is your resource, 28 plus years and of your expertise available, which is great. So thank you for sharing with us today and with our listeners. And to our listeners, we love you so much. Check out Shameless Sex Premium if you want more content. You can get an all access pass. We are live with that. So check us out. It's just more content for you that's ad free. And we love you. We'll keep doing this for as long as you support us. So review us on your favorite podcast app. You can check us out on YouTube as well. We are here for you. We love you. We'll keep shining on you every Tuesday, and we'll see you next Tuesday, y'all. Ciao for now.